The spaceport on Oris 4 was never quiet. Voices rose and fell in dozens of languages. The metallic echo of footsteps rang on the steel platforms, and the smell of machine oil mixed with the sweet spice of street food. Cargo drones hummed, overhead carrying crates marked with bright warning symbols. Travelers pushed past each other with hurried expressions, and vendors shouted over the noise to sell their wares. It was the usual chaos of a trade hub at the edge of known space, a place where every species seemed to meet, if only for a few hours before scattering again to far-off worlds. Then she walked in. At first it was subtle. A few heads turned. A merchant. Mid-sentence faltered. The crowd's movement slowed as if something invisible had brushed against them. Then it happened all at once. People stepped back, faces tightening, voices cutting off mid-word. An old alien woman gagged and turned away. A group of miners dropped their drinks and hurried off, muttering curses. The wide main corridor that had been packed a moment earlier became strangely open in the middle, leaving a clear path for the one who had caused it. She was young, tall, and thin, her skin a soft pale tone with a faint green shimmer that caught the light like mist over water. Her hair was long and dark, braided into a simple cord down her back. The most striking thing about her were her eyes, a deep violet that seemed almost too vivid to be real. She walked slowly, her head slightly lowered, as though she knew exactly what reaction she would cause, and had long stopped fighting it. Around her, the air seemed heavier, warmer, filled with a scent no machine could detect, but which made every alien in sight recoil. Every alien except one. Near the edge of the market, a human engineer was kneeling beside a service panel, a toolkit open. At his side, he had been called in to repair a faulty comms relay, the kind of small, overlooked job no one else wanted. The moment she entered his view, he noticed the way the crowd peeled away from her. He heard the muttering, saw the anger and discomfort in their faces. He expected to feel something too, maybe that same unease that seemed to sweep the corridor like an invisible tide. Instead, he felt nothing unpleasant at all. In fact, as she drew closer, he caught the faintest trace of the scent that had driven the others away, and it stirred something unexpected in him. It was unlike any smell he had known, warm and sharp at once, like rain on sun-baked stone or the faint smoke of a distant fire. It made him feel strangely alert, focused, as though the noise and clutter of the station faded to the background. The girl reached a vendor's stall and set a small pouch of credits on the counter. The vendor, a heavy-set alien with mottled skin, stared at her for a long moment, his wide nostrils flaring. Then his expression twisted into disgust, and he shoved the pouch back so hard it slid off the counter and spilled onto the floor. "We don't serve your kind here," he said in a low, rough voice that carried far in the sudden hush. She bent to pick up the pouch, her movements calm but her shoulders tight. Without a word, she turned away. The human found himself standing before he realized what he was doing. He crossed the space between them in a few long strides and stopped beside her. "You dropped this," he said, handing her the pouch. Her violet eyes lifted to meet his, and for a moment she looked almost startled, as if she hadn't expected anyone to stand this close. She took the pouch, her fingers brushing his hand lightly. "You should go," she said quietly. "The longer you stay near me, the more trouble you'll have." He glanced around. The other merchants were watching with open hostility. A few had already turned to whisper to nearby security drones. "Looks like you already have trouble," he replied, his voice calm. "I'm not in a hurry to leave." Her lips tightened, somewhere between a frown and a faint smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. She started walking, and he fell into step beside her. The scent was stronger here, yet still it felt strangely pleasant to him, like something familiar but just out of reach of memory. "You're human," she said after a moment, as though testing the word. "That's right. No wonder you can stand this. They can't. She tilted her head slightly toward the crowd, where aliens were giving them a wide berth, some pressing filters to their faces, others muttering insults in low voices. "What is it?" he asked. "Your scent?" She nodded. "To them it is. Unbearable. To you." She let the sentence trail off. "It is better if you don't know more." They reached a quieter section of the station, a maintenance corridor where the overhead lights flickered faintly and the walls smelled faintly of coolant. Here the stairs were fewer, but the sense of being watched was still there, as if the very walls held whispers. "Thank you for helping back there," she said softly. "But you should understand, I don't stay in one place for long. People like me, we aren't welcome. People like you, not people. Not to them, something else, something to fear or use." Her eyes darkened. Either way, not something to trust. He studied her face. There was no bitterness in her voice, only tired certainty, as though she had lived too long with the same pattern repeating over and over. He wanted to ask her more, but before he could speak, a sharp mechanical buzz sounded from the ceiling. Station-wide announcement. Docking Bay 6 clear for incoming vessels. Cargo transfer begins in 2 minutes. The moment passed. She shifted the strap of her small satchel higher on her shoulder. "This is where I leave you. I mean it, don't. Follow me." He could have turned back then, could have returned to his work and forgotten her. But as she walked away, the faint trace of her scent lingered in the air, and something inside him told him that this was not the last time their paths would cross. In a place where 1,000 smells and sounds clashed every day, hers was the only one that felt like it cut through the noise and left something clear, something that mattered. The human saw her again 2 days later in a dim corner of the station's food market. She was sitting alone at a small table, her satchel resting against her leg, her hands wrapped around a steaming cup. The smell around her kept the other tables empty, leaving a wide circle of space as if an invisible barrier pushed everyone back. She did not look around. Her eyes stayed on the cup in her hands, as if she could disappear by looking at it long enough. He bought a plate of fried grain and spiced root from a vendor and walked over. She looked up when he set it down across from her. For a moment her gaze flicked to the people staring from a distance, then back to him. "You don't listen well," she said. "I listen fine," he replied, sitting down. "I just don't take orders from strangers." The faintest smile touched her lips but vanished quickly. "You shouldn't be here. Being near me makes you a target. That will matter when you find yourself on the wrong end of a stun rifle." He took a bite of the fried grain. "Then maybe you should explain why." She was silent for a long time. The steam from her drink curled up into the air between them. Finally she spoke in a low voice. "My people live far from the main routes. We never traded much with others. We didn't need to. Our home had what we needed, and we had no reason to leave. But the galaxy has a way of finding you, even if you hide." She paused, her fingers tightening around the cup. "It started when explorers came. They couldn't stay long because of the scent. For them it was unbearable, a poison in the air. They called us cursed. Some left. Others saw value." "Value?" he asked. "The scent is not just a smell. It is part of us. It changes the body of whoever breathes it, just a little, just enough. In most alien species, it drives the senses into chaos. Nausea, headaches, panic. But there are some who found that if you take the compound inside, refine it, you can make soldiers fight harder, longer, without fear. They call it war breath." He leaned back, his mind turning over her words. "And humans? You are different," she said quietly. "It doesn't make you sick. It makes you sharp, calm, focused. I've never known why. But you are the only ones who can stand near me without turning away." He thought back to their first meeting. The strange warmth, the sense of focus, it made sense now. So that's why people keep their distance, she nodded. It is why my people are hunted. A single person can be harvested for years if kept alive. The compound is rare. We cannot hide our scent. We cannot remove it. It is as much a part of us as blood. He saw the weight in her posture now, the way her shoulders hunched slightly forward. Not from weakness but from carrying the same fear for too long. Is that why you're here? Hiding? Her gaze slid toward the far side of the market where a pair of tall figures in heavy cloaks stood talking to a vendor. I came here because I thought I could pass through unnoticed. I was wrong. Word travels. There are already people looking for me. They call themselves collectors, but they are nothing more than hunters. He followed her gaze. The cloaked figures had the stillness of professionals. Even from here, he could feel their attention sweeping the room. They're here for you? They are here for the compound. I am only the container. The words hit him harder than he expected. He had seen his share of cruelty on the outer stations, but something about the way she said it made it colder. What's your name? He asked suddenly. She hesitated before answering, as if weighing whether to give it. Lyra. All right, Lyra. I'm not letting them take you. She shook her head. You do not understand. Once they see you with me, they will hunt you too. And unlike me, you have no scent to keep them at a distance. I'm an engineer, he said simply. I can make other things keep them at a distance. For the first time her eyes softened. But it was only for a heartbeat before she looked away again. You should not care. I have been alone a long time. I know how to run. He pushed his plate aside and leaned forward. And where will you run when they find you again on the next station? Or the next? How many times can you keep running? Before they catch you? Her lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. The silence between them stretched out, then she stood. Come, she said. He followed her through a maze of side corridors far from the busy market levels. The lights here were dimmer, the walls streaked with rust and oil. Pipes clattered somewhere overhead as coolant hissed through unseen valves. Finally, she stopped in a narrow storage space with a single maintenance lamp casting long shadows. This is where I sleep, she said. It was little more than a folded blanket in the corner and a small box of supplies. A dented water container sat beside it. There was no door. Only a metal sheet she could pull across to block the light. You shouldn't have to live like this, he said quietly. Her eyes met his again. It is better than being locked in a cage. He understood then that she was not simply passing through. She was waiting, watching for a chance to move again. The hunters were a shadow that followed her everywhere. And now, by talking to her, he had stepped into that shadow. Far down the corridor, a faint metallic clank echoed, followed by soft footsteps. Lyra's head turned sharply toward the sound. Her nostrils flared, and her voice dropped to almost a whisper. They're here. The footsteps in the corridor grew clearer, slow and deliberate, like someone who knew exactly where they were going. Lyra's body tensed, her shoulders low, her hands curling slightly as if ready to run. The human's mind raced. The storage space was too small to hide in, and the thin metal sheet that served as a door would not stop anyone determined to get in. He reached into his toolkit without a word, his fingers finding the small torch he used for welding. The figures appeared at the end of the corridor, their heavy cloaks brushing the floor, their faces hidden behind dark masks. Even from here, the human could see the faint gleam of armor beneath the cloth. They stopped, their heads tilting slightly in unison, and he knew they had spotted them. Lyra's breath came fast and shallow. She gave a small shake of her head toward him, as if telling him to stay back, but he stepped forward instead. His voice was steady, though his heart beat hard. You're lost. This section is restricted for maintenance staff only. The taller of the two hunters said nothing. A low hum came from a device at their side, scanning the air. The shorter one spoke in a flat tone. Target confirmed. Lyra turned and bolted down the side passage without another word. The hunters moved instantly, their cloaks flaring as they followed. The human ran after them, his boots striking the metal floor in quick, heavy steps. The corridor twisted sharply, and he caught a glimpse of Lyra ahead, her braid whipping behind her as she darted between a pair of supply crates. She was fast, but the hunters were relentless, their steps never slowing. One of them reached for something beneath the cloak, and he saw the glint of a weapon. He didn't think. He hurled the small welding torch down the passage. It clattered across the floor, sparks flashing as it struck the wall. And for a second, the sudden light distracted the nearer hunter. Lyra seized the moment to slip through a narrow maintenance hatch. Vanishing from sight. The human sprinted after her, diving into the hatch just before one of the hunters could grab him. The space inside was tight and dark, the air warm from the pipes running along the walls. He could hear the thud of boots above them as the hunters moved toward another access point. Lyra was already crawling fast, her movements sure as if she had memorized the station's hidden paths. "Keep moving," she said over her shoulder, her voice low but urgent. They emerged into a wider tunnel where the hum of machinery filled the air. She stopped, listening. The sound of the hunters was faint now, but it was not gone. "They won't give up," she said. "Once they find my trail, they will follow it until I am caught or dead. Then we have to make sure they lose it," he said, glancing around. The tunnel branched in 3 directions, each marked with faded numbers. "Where does this one lead?" "Docking sector," she replied. "But they'll expect me to head there." "Then we make them expect it," he said. He pulled a small signal beacon from his toolkit and tossed it down one of the side tunnels. It skidded across the floor, blinking brightly. That should keep them busy for a few minutes. Lyra gave him a quick, searching look, as if she had not expected him to act so easily on her side. Then she took the opposite path, moving quickly but without running. "Follow me. There's another way out." They moved through the dim tunnels until the sound of the main station returned distant voices, the hum of lifts, the faint clatter of tools. Lyra led him into a cargo storage area, rows of tall crates stacked in uneven towers. The air smelled faintly of dust and old fuel. She crouched between 2 stacks and motioned for him to do the same. "Why are you helping me?" she asked quietly. He thought for a moment. "Because I've seen enough people turned into things. You're not a thing." For a long moment she said nothing. Then she looked past him, her eyes narrowing. "We're not alone," he followed her gaze. At the far end of the storage area, one of the hunters stepped silently into view, their dark mask reflecting the faint light. The other appeared moments later, blocking the only open path. They had been faster than he'd hoped. Lyra's scent filled the narrow space between the crates, stronger now, sharp and warm. He saw the nearest hunter shift uncomfortably, their head tilting back slightly as if the air had grown harder to breathe, but they were still coming. The human's eyes swept the crates, looking for anything useful. One stack bore the hazard markings for compressed gas. He tapped Lyra's arm and pointed. She understood instantly. They moved together, staying low until they reached the marked crate. He pulled a small cutting tool from his belt and worked quickly at the seal. The metal hissed and split, and the sharp scent of gas burst into the air. The hunters hesitated now, their steps slowing. Lyra stepped forward, the gas swirling around her. Her natural scent mixed with it, and the nearest hunter staggered as it struck. The other tried to raise a weapon, but their aim faltered. "Go," the human said. Grabbing her arm, they slipped between the crates and out a narrow service door, the sound of coughing and stumbling echoing behind them. Once outside, Lyra leaned against the wall, her breath fast but steady. "You risked yourself again," she said. "Looks like it worked," he replied. Glancing back toward the door, she met his eyes. It won't stop them for long. They'll know now that you're with me." "I guessed that already," he said, with a faint smile. "So where do we run next?" For the first time, a small spark of trust flickered in her gaze. "Somewhere they won't follow unless they have a death wish." The waste sector. The waste sector was unlike any other part of the station. The air was damp and heavy, carrying the sour tang of decay mixed with the sharp bite of cleaning chemicals. Lights were fewer here, and the ones that worked flickered in uneven pulses. The floor was slick in places from condensation dripping down the thick pipes overhead. Machines rumbled in the distance, grinding and churning the endless refuse that poured in. From every level of Oris 4, the human kept close to Lyra as they moved deeper into the maze of passageways. The waste sector was a place most avoided, unless they had work here, and even then they finished quickly. The station's refuse processors were enormous and unforgiving, able to crush metal and flesh without pause. The hunters might follow them into many places, but this sector would force them to slow down, to think carefully about each step. They passed a row of sorting pits where mechanical arms reached down to separate salvage from garbage. Sparks flew when a piece of scrap was dropped into a grinding chute. The noise was loud enough to cover the sound of their footsteps. Lyra glanced around often, her eyes sharp, her movements steady but fast. "Do you know where we're going?" he asked as they ducked under a low-hanging pipe. "Yes," she said. "There's an old access tunnel at the far end. It connects to a disused docking slip. Few know it exists, and fewer dare use it. The slip is sealed, but if you can open it—" "I can open it," he said without hesitation. Her lips curved in the faintest smile, though it faded quickly. "Good, then we have a chance." They turned down a narrow corridor lined with rusted grates. The smell here was stronger, almost overwhelming, but the human kept moving, breathing through it. Lyra's scent cut through the stench, steady and warm, and he felt his focus sharpen as before. For a time the only sounds were the hiss of steam and the dull thud of machinery. Then came another sound, soft, almost hidden beneath the noise, a faint scrape of boots on metal. Lyra stopped, her head tilting slightly. "They're here," she said quietly. The human looked back. A shadow shifted at the far end of the corridor. The hunters had followed them even here. Their cloaks were streaked with grime now, their masks glinting faintly in the poor light. They moved with the same slow, certain steps as before, like predators closing in. "Keep going," he said, stepping behind Lyra to cover her as they hurried on. They passed through a chamber where enormous gears turned slowly, each one larger than a cargo shuttle. The air vibrated with their motion. Lyra moved quickly along the narrow walkway, gripping the rail tightly. The human followed, glancing down into the depths where the gears meshed and ground together. A fall there would mean instant death. They reached the far side and slipped through another hatch into a quieter tunnel. Lyra slowed slightly, her breathing quick but controlled. "We're close," she said. "Just one more sector." As they moved, her voice dropped lower. "There's something I didn't tell you. My people, we tried once to live among others. We thought maybe our scent would not matter if they could see us as more than the odor we carried. But the moment we stepped onto alien soil, they recoiled. We were turned away from ports, markets, homes. No one would shelter us. Except humans. You didn't have much power then, no influence in the council. But you didn't fear us. For a time we thought we might have found a place to belong. What happened?" he asked, though he could guess. Her eyes darkened. "It didn't last. We were too few, and the hunters too many. The humans who helped us were threatened, attacked. We could not stay. We vanished into the edges of space." They walked in silence for a while after that. The sound of the hunters was gone for the moment, but he knew they were still there. Searching. At last they reached a heavy sealed door with faded hazard markings. Lyra stepped aside. "This is it. Can you open it?" The human set down his toolkit and began working on the lock. The mechanism was old, layers of dust coating the panel. He pried it open and pulled out a bundle of wires, connecting them to a small power driver from his kit. The lock resisted at first, then gave a sharp click. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow docking slip long abandoned. The slip smelled of old metal and dust. A single small shuttle sat at the far end, its hull scarred but intact. Lyra moved toward it quickly, her steps echoing in the stillness. "Looks like it hasn't flown in years," the human said as he joined her. "Can you make it fly?" she asked. He ran his hand over the control panel. "I can try." He set to work, pulling open the access hatch and checking the power couplings. The systems were corroded, but not beyond repair. He was halfway through reconnecting the main line when a sharp metallic clang echoed from the slip entrance. Lyra's head snapped toward the sound. The hunters had found them again. They stepped through the doorway, their dark forms framed in the light from the tunnel beyond. The human worked faster, his fingers flying over the last connections. Lyra stepped between him and the hunters, her scent filling the slip. The air seemed to grow heavier. One of the hunters faltered, their weapon lowering slightly. The other pressed forward, forcing through the discomfort. The shuttle systems flickered to life, lights glowing faintly on the console. "Get in," he called. Lyra backed toward the hatch, never taking her eyes off the hunters. They moved quickly once inside, the human sliding into the pilot's seat. The engines groaned, then roared weakly to life. As the shuttle lifted, one of the hunters lunged forward, grabbing the edge of the hatch. Lyra slammed her foot down, kicking the hand free, and the hunter fell back. The shuttle rose higher, the docking slip shrinking below them. The human turned the ship toward the void beyond the station. "Where to?" he asked. Lyra's gaze stayed on the stars ahead. "Somewhere far, somewhere they won't think to look." The ship floated near the vast ring of a silent planet, its light shimmering in the cold darkness, and inside the chamber. The alien girl stood at the center, surrounded by the strange light that seemed to come from her own body. The air was thick with the scent that had once driven others away. Yet the human walked closer with steady steps, his heart calm and strong. He could see her eyes holding a mixture of fear and hope, and he knew this was the moment when everything they had endured would find its meaning. The alien girl whispered that the scent was not just a random curse, but the mark of her people's last protection, a living signal meant to guard the carriers from harm. It was the reason predators in space avoided her, the reason entire fleets had kept their distance, the reason she had lived in loneliness all this time. The human reached out his hand and told her that to him it was not a wall, it was a bridge, because it had led him to her. She trembled, and the light grew warmer, the air around them shifting into something like a soft breeze, instead of the heavy wave it had once been. She explained that if they joined their life forces, the scent would no longer push others away, but draw the right kind of beings, the ones who could help rebuild what her people had lost. The human agreed without hesitation. He had faced storms of metal and fire, and never once turned away from her. Why would he turn away now? They stood together, hands locked, and the chamber began to hum, a deep tone rising from the walls as the ancient technology of her ancestors awakened. The light formed a spiral around them, carrying with it a rush of memories and visions of the alien homeworld. Lush and vibrant before its fall, she saw her people walking again in the gray halls, their songs filling the air. She saw them greeting the human with gratitude. She saw the scent changing from a warning to a welcome. When the vision ended, the two of them were still standing in the chamber, but the silence of before was gone. The ship's systems had awakened, and a voice spoke in the ancient tongue. She translated it, saying they now had the authority to guide the relic world back to life. The human looked at her, and saw that she was no longer the lonely figure from the derelict station. She was now the link between the past and the future. And he was part of that link. They left the chamber together, walking through the halls now lit with warm gold light. They looked out at the planet below, and knew that soon its surface would not be dead rock, but growing green land with rivers, and skies filled with life. And though fleets would come and others would gather, the scent that had once pushed all away would now be the sign of safe passage and home. The humans smiled and said that in the end, it was never about the odor, it was about what it meant. And the alien girl smiled back, knowing that for the first time in her life, she could stand without fear beside someone who chose her not despite what she was, but because of it. And in that moment, as the ship moved toward the planet, they both knew their journey was complete, and their bond would hold no matter what the stars brought next. The end.